My name is Olivia. I am 28 years old, and I work for a gaming company in New York, doing creative activities that bring me joy and satisfaction. Outwardly, my life may seem carefree, full of opportunities and vivid impressions. People see in my image someone who lives in a megalopolis, surrounded by innovations and ambitious people, who succeed in their profession and enjoy life to the fullest. However, if they knew what my family's situation really was, they wouldn't be so confident in their judgments. A year ago, our family experienced a real tragedy. My father's company, which he had been building for decades, suddenly went bankrupt. It was a hard blow for all of us. We lived in prosperity, we could afford not to think about tomorrow, but everything collapsed in one moment. My money reserves quickly ran out, and in order to support my parents, I was forced to return to my hometown and start living with them and my younger sister Karina. Our relationship with Karina has always been difficult. She is younger than me, but despite this, she often behaved as if all the responsibility for the family should lie with me. I earn money, which is enough to provide for the needs of the family, but it goes away faster than I would like. Sometimes I feel like responsibility weighs on me when I realize that my income is the only thing that keeps us afloat. Mom is also trying to help, but her attempts to find a job in our small town have been unsuccessful. Tonight, when we had dinner, Karina said she wanted pork steaks for dinner tomorrow. She said it so nonchalantly, as if we didn't have any financial difficulties, as if we could still afford sumptuous meals like in the old days. Mom, who was sitting next to me, turned to me and asked with a slight tension in her voice, "Olivia, could you invest a little more in the food budget? We're running out of money, and we can't even afford to buy a pork tenderloin." I frowned. These words irritated me. How could you ask me for more if I was the only one who brought money into the house? I replied coldly, "We've already run out of money for this month. We're not even halfway to the end of it, and you're already asking for more." Karina abruptly intervened in the conversation. Her tone was full of reproaches. "Are you saying that you ran out of money? I'm already contributing $3,000 a month, and that's more than enough." I looked at her with surprise and annoyance. Does she contribute $3,000? I knew it wasn't true, but her insolence made me lose my patience. Just as I was about to answer, she continued, "Prices have gone up, and $3,000 is no longer enough for a family of 4. I couldn't help myself. The anger inside me grew, and I blurted out, "Only $3,000? If you have complaints, why don't you go and earn some money yourself? The job will not be found by itself." Mom immediately intervened. Her voice was soft but full of reproaches. "Don't be so hard on Karina. It's hard to find a job now, you know." She sided with my sister again, and it burned me inside. I thought about how Karina was using job hunting as an excuse to do nothing. She spends her days in vain, without taking any real steps to change the situation. And the money I earn goes to her personal needs, not reaching the general budget. Then I strongly suggested, "If it's so difficult, why don't we sell this house and move to Mom's hometown? We could find jobs there, and life could be easier." Mom immediately objected. Her voice became more stern, as if she could not imagine that anyone could leave this house. "We can't go back there." My mom started to become even more strict than usual, as if she felt that the conversation was about something painful and personal for her. I knew she didn't like physical labor, especially when it came to cooking. This has always been a source of tension in our family. My grandmother, known for her strictness and exactingness, especially in culinary matters, often criticized my mother for her unwillingness to cook or help in the kitchen. She could scold her for hours for avoiding work, especially Pete's-related work. And Mom only sullenly remained silent in response, hiding her resentment behind icy calmness. My father, on the other hand, has always been an advocate that we should solve our problems on our own. He often reminded us, Why are you running so fast to Grandma for help when we can handle it ourselves? His words rang in my head every time the conversation turned to money. I wanted to scream out of desperation and inner pain. How can I be considered spoiled when I literally dragged the whole family on myself? It seemed to me the height of injustice. And it was especially unbearable that my younger sister Karina, who is already 26 years old, continued to live as if she had no need to think about work. I suggested that Karina should at least try to find a part-time job. It would help to take some of the burden off me, and her own life could change for the better. But Mom immediately objected, her voice trembling with hidden irritation. No, Karina helps around the house. She doesn't have time for a side job. I just had to restrain myself from crying out in despair. Help around the house? Yes, I've never seen Karina do anything significant. The only thing she really did was put the dishes in the sink after eating and sometimes washed her own clothes. My father, without going into details, only added, Karina sometimes massages my shoulders when my back hurts. I felt anger begin to boil inside me. These little things, which my father so easily mistook for help, were nothing compared to what I was doing. I got up early every morning, cooked breakfast for the whole family, packed a lunchbox for my father, kept track of finances and even managed tax payments. However, despite all this, parents always preferred Karina, as if she was something special, irreplaceable. Karina was a favorite. This has been obvious since childhood. Yes, I was also considered pretty, but her appearance always attracted more attention. She had a more refined face, her manners were refined, and, oddly enough, her parents always treated her with some special love. I often felt like I was in the background, although I couldn't deny that my efforts were important. Sometimes it seemed to me that the right decision would be to leave this family, to find my own place in the world. But life is so complicated that I couldn't just leave. Leaving my parents and Karina would be tantamount to betrayal, especially now that our family needed money more than ever. A few days passed, and at first I didn't even notice that Karina had disappeared from the house. I thought she was just leaving as usual to meet friends or something like that. However, when she wasn't there the next day or the next day, I got suspicious. Something was wrong. In the evening, I returned home and was heading to my room when I suddenly heard my parents talking in the living room. I stopped in the hallway, holding my breath. My mother excitedly told my father, I can't wait for souvenirs from Hawaii. Karina is so lucky now. She is probably relaxing on beautiful beaches and enjoying food in luxurious restaurants. I almost dropped my bag. Hawaii? Is my sister, who was always complaining about the lack of money, in Hawaii now? I couldn't keep silent any longer and interrupted their conversation. Wait, what are you talking about? Are you saying that Karina is in Hawaii now? My parents looked at me with puzzled eyes, as if they didn't understand that I might not know about it. Yes, it's true, my father replied calmly, as if it was the most common thing. I stood at a loss, unable to comprehend this unexpected development of events. How could my sister, who has no money, afford such a trip? I couldn't afford even modest pleasures like shopping, but Karina. In Hawaii? Mom explained with a smile. She won a lottery trip. You know, Karina has always been lucky with such things. It seemed like too good a coincidence, but I decided not to insist on my doubts. However, the next day, when I was at work, I suddenly got a call from a credit card company that I rarely used. They reported that large expenditures in the amount of $10,000 had been recorded over the past 3 days. I immediately guessed who was to blame. Of course, it was my sister, who was currently enjoying a vacation in Hawaii. She might have won tickets and accommodation, but someone had to pay for all the extra expenses, souvenirs, food, entertainment. Determined to uncover the truth, I called Karina. What are you doing? Explain yourself, I said, barely holding back my anger. Oh, I'm surprised you called. sis," she replied happily. "I thought you were already waiting for your souvenirs. You used my credit card without permission. Didn't you even notice that it was a crime?" I almost shouted into the phone, feeling indignation boiling up in me. "Oh, don't make a big deal out of a molehill." Her voice was so casual that it only irritated me more. "We're a family, it's a completely different matter." My heart sank at her words. Karina spoke as if everything that was happening was normal, as if stealing $10,000 from her sister was normal. How could you spend $10,000 in 3 days? This is absurd. Well, I had to pay for everything. Karina snorted, as if I was asking the stupidest question in the world. Yes, tickets and accommodation were free, but all tourist activities, shopping trips, eating in restaurants. You know, I added some luxury restaurants and brand purchases, so the amount quickly accumulated. $10,000 is more than anyone should spend in 3 days, even in Hawaii. I tried to stay calm, even though it wasn't easy. Karina just giggled. "You worry too much, sis. I spent it wisely, and the card is expiring, so relax. You'll pay the bills as soon as you can," she said with cheerful nonchalance before simply hanging up. I stood in silence, unable to believe what had happened. My heart was pounding with anger and impotence. How could she do that? I was literally speechless, not knowing what to do next. I tried to call her back, but she didn't answer. After a while, I received a voice message. "Well, it looks like I really messed up. You know, I'm so stupid, I can't help laughing. Oh, yes, sis, please unlock the card. The parents' cards have already been exhausted and cannot be used for payments. Thanks in advance." I almost clutched the phone in my hand. Her complacency infuriated me, but the worst part was that she didn't see any problem with it. She thought I had to pay for her irresponsibility just because we were family. When I returned home in the evening, my parents were already waiting for me at the door. They looked worried, but as soon as I entered, my mother began to worry in her voice. "Welcome back. How could you do this to Karina? Do you know that she's in a difficult situation? Why did you block the card?" I looked at her in disbelief. Did they really think I should have let her keep spending the money she had already stolen? Is the situation difficult? I couldn't help but be sarcastic. She stole $10,000 from my card. Of course, I blocked it as soon as I found out. She just didn't know that the card wasn't working anymore. Her father intervened, spreading his hands. She was ready to buy us all souvenirs. I felt anger flare up inside me. Souvenirs? Is that their only concern? I have invested all my strength and resources in supporting the family, and they justify Karina and her uncontrolled spending. You're both incredible. I couldn't help myself. How can you think that this is normal? She stole from me, and you just gave up on it. Is that how parents behave? Mom was frowning, looking away, as if she didn't want to continue the conversation, but she said anyway. She's thinking about us. Karina tries to have fun, but with family care. You should be more thoughtful. Thoughtful? I couldn't believe my ears. Thoughtful? She stole the money, and do you consider it a concern? Suddenly, I remembered the voice message. I pulled out my phone and listened to it again. Karina's voice was as cheerful and carefree as ever. "Please make the map usable. Our parents' cards have already been exhausted." I felt a wave of anger and fatigue cover my head. Hearing Karina's angry voice on the answering machine, my parents' anger quickly subsided, and they, as if forgetting everything, hurried to their room. A few minutes later, I heard their panicked scream. I had already expected this, so I calmly went to them. The parents' faces were distorted with anxiety and anger. My father shouted in exasperation. "I can't believe Karina used your card without permission. After all we've done for her. She even took our bank books and cards, the mother added, her voice trembling with betrayal. I crossed my arms over my chest, stifling a sneer. Wasn't it a kind gesture from Karina, who was trying to buy you souvenirs? She just wanted to have fun, right? Both my parents looked at each other in confusion. My father muttered, "Well, yes, but our money is still safe, right?" I couldn't help but smile bitterly. All their anger evaporated as soon as they realized that their money was not affected. My disappointment increased with every word they said. They only cared about their money, not that Karina betrayed their trust. "Ah, so why don't you increase the card limit?" I said mockingly. "Accelerate the repayment of debts, and let Karina be able to use it again. After all, it was such a kind Karina who tried to buy you souvenirs." "It's impossible," the mother said, lowering her head. "We don't have any more savings. What should we do now?" My father suddenly came up to me, his voice softened, and there was a desperate plea in it. "Olivia, we promise, we will start all over again. We will support this family. Please help Karina." I involuntarily froze at his words. My mother followed his example and knelt down in front of me. "Please, my daughter, we are aware of our mistakes. We will change our lives. I swear that from now on I will support all of you. I won't let you or Karina feel bad anymore." Her voice was full of sincere remorse, and it confused me for a moment. But I quickly pulled myself together. Laughter burst out of me, despite the presence of my parents. Their pathetic apologies seemed empty against the background of all those years when they preferred Karina and ignored my efforts. However, a plan was already forming inside me. When my parents returned to their room to check the bills, I took out my credit card, the one I secretly kept for a rainy day. It had not expired yet, and there was not a single write-off on it. "Why don't you give this card to Karina?" I deliberately flippantly dropped the phrase, watching their reaction. "Let him enjoy another trip with you. A family should support each other, shouldn't it?" My parents jumped at the idea with unexpected enthusiasm. They hurried to contact Karina, preparing for a new trip, while I booked tickets to Hawaii online, watching the whole scene with a barely noticeable smile. 3 days have passed. Karina returned with her parents from Hawaii, beaming with contentment. "Thank you, big sister," she said happily, coming up to me. "You gave us the opportunity to have such a good rest. Are you probably waiting for souvenirs?" "Unfortunately, I didn't buy anything," she added, not even trying to apologize. Obviously, they had forgotten about their gratitude, which they had expressed only 3 days ago. I looked at her with cold calmness. Everything was boiling inside me, but outwardly I remained unperturbed. "You seem to have fun," I said calmly. "It was probably the last important moment in your life." Karina frowned at my words. "The last one? What do you mean?" Actually, I paused, enjoying her confusion. "I sold the house. And I've already moved my things to a new place. Everything is already settled." Perplexity and shock appeared on the faces of the parents and Karina. They couldn't believe my words. "Did you sell our house?" Karina seemed stunned. "What does this mean? Didn't you notice the sale sign?" I pointed to the sign at the entrance to our family home. "Did you really sell the house?" The mother tried to get up, but her legs were shaking with excitement. Her father stood next to her, clearly amazed. "Yes," I said. "An old friend of mine, a real estate agent, has been interested in this land for a long time. But I always refused to sell the house," I said, looking around at their stunned faces, "because I thought that maintaining this house, which was not built by our grandmother, was more cost-effective." I sighed, but continued resolutely. "However, I recently changed my mind. I realized that by selling this house and starting to live alone, I could gain both financial and moral freedom. That's why, While you were enjoying Hawaii, I confirmed my decision with the real estate agent. Selling a house without our consent is illegal. My mother screamed, a mixture of panic and discontent in her voice. This house belongs to Dad, you can't just sell it. I answered calmly, almost coldly, watching their moods change quickly. Oh, you look very energetic about this. But what would you say if you found out that the house and land were actually registered in my name? My mother's eyes widened in surprise, and my father, on the contrary, frowned, remembering. Dad, do you remember when you came to me because you couldn't pay taxes? I agreed to help with the house, but on the condition that we changed the registration to my name. The silence that followed my words was deafening. My father finally mumbled something unintelligible, as if trying to remember that conversation. And I continued, emphasizing every word. Oh, yes, that's right. That's why I haven't left this house all these years. He was registered to me. And all this time I was looking for an opportunity to sell it. But it wasn't easy, because you were always at home. The only chance came when I sent you on this trip to Hawaii. As soon as you left, I was finally able to make a deal. My words hung in the air, and I saw their faces start to distort from shock. What? Did you really sell the house? Karina looked at me, not believing what she had heard. Yes, I confirmed, pointing to the "for sale" sign hanging by the gate. And the things have already been sent to the new house. Don't worry, a truck will arrive soon to pick up the rest. My father tried to say something, but I interrupted him with a mocking tone. Oh, yes, Grandma is waiting for you all with impatience. She said she couldn't wait for you to arrive. Get ready for daily pizza cooking and cleaning. It seems that she is ready to teach you some lessons too. Grandma? You mean Mom? My mother looked at me in confusion, as if looking for support. Yes, I nodded. I talked to her recently. She agreed to take you all in. She thinks it makes sense for you to learn to live. She asked me to send the luggage to her. Everything is ready. The reaction of my parents and sister was predictable. They desperately did not want to go to their grandmother, especially Karina. Her face paled as she realized that everything she had dreamed of was crumbling. We can't go to Grandma's. Karina screamed, but her voice was almost pitiful. Well, then stay, I shrugged. But without a home and a job, how are you going to live? And then there's the payment on that credit card. How are you going to deal with such huge debts? What? My mother froze, her gaze darting between Karina and me. I grinned. Oh, yes, I'm talking about the card with Karina's name on it. Did you think it was in my name? My mother grabbed the card I had recently given her and took a quick look at the inscription. Her face paled instantly. Wait a minute. Is this card in Karina's name? I nodded. Yes, that's right. This was Karina's first card, which she received when she started working. She hardly used it because she quit, saying that the job was not suitable for her. And the debts are still hanging. Karina looked at me in horror, unable to utter a word. What should I do? She muttered, clutching the card in her hand. I paused, enjoying her confusion. What should I do? This is your card, so you have no choice but to pay off the debt. Make sure you earn enough to cover the living expenses of all of you, I added calmly. Don't forget, Grandma is waiting. It will help you learn how to earn money. After moving to a new apartment closer to work, I gradually began to feel calm, which I had been missing for a long time. My life flowed smoothly and I enjoyed the peaceful days. In the evenings, when the city was sinking into twilight, I went out on the balcony, from where I could see the lights of the metropolis disappearing into the evening fog. I felt relieved, as if the weight of many years of tension had finally been lifted from my shoulders. But at the same time, there was a subtle feeling of loneliness somewhere inside me. One evening, when the headlights were already beginning to reflect on the wet pavement, my phone rang. Grandma's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated for just a moment before picking up the phone. "Hello, Grandma," I replied quietly, looking forward to the conversation. There was concern in her voice, as always. "Olivia, how are you? Are you all right?" "Yes, Grandma, I'm fine." I tried to speak evenly, but of course she immediately caught the change in my mood. Sighing, she moved on to what was bothering her the most. "Actually, I wanted to talk about Karina and your parents. They have changed a lot lately, especially Karina. She started helping with the work for real, and your parents seem to be thinking about what happened." Grandma's words penetrated me like a slight chill. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Grandma continued with a quiet but determined voice. "I know it wasn't easy, dear. I can imagine how hard it is for you. Sometimes the family becomes a real burden, but at the same time it is something that we have to support. I hope that one day you will be able to forgive them." There was hesitation in her words, but also an unwavering steadfastness. It seemed to me that she was asking for more than just forgiveness, but I was not ready for such great emotions. "Take your time, Olivia, think about it. May your heart calm down," she said tenderly before we ended the conversation. "Yes, Grandma, I understand. I'm not in a hurry." "I'll think about it again," I replied, nodding, although she couldn't see it. After the phone rings died down, I froze in place, looking at the sunset sky. The city was plunging into the silence of the night, wrapped in a blanket of darkness, and with it a storm of emotions raged in me: anger, sadness, and now a small spark of hope. Returning to the room, I noticed a family photo on the shelf. We were still happy in it, me, little Karina, and our parents smiling on the sunny lawn. These faces, captured on paper, caused me mixed feelings. I remembered those joyful days when there were no hard decisions or betrayals. But reality quickly brought me back to the present. Over time, my life began to return to a normal rhythm. At work, I was entrusted with the management of a new project, and I became more and more immersed in everyday affairs, trying to fully focus on my career. It distracted me, allowed me to forget about family problems, at least for a while. One evening, after another busy day, the phone rang again. This time the number was unknown. Hesitating, I decided to answer anyway. "Hello, this is Olivia," I said in a neutral tone. I heard a timid voice on the other end of the line, which I did not immediately recognize. "It's me, Karina," she said. I froze, trying to process what I was hearing. It was my younger sister, but her voice had changed a lot. He didn't have the same confidence and arrogance. He was gentle, almost humble. My surprise was soon replaced by caution. "Karina, something happened?" I asked, feeling excitement rising inside me. "I'm sorry I called unexpectedly," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Actually, I would like to meet you in person. I need to talk to you." Her words sounded sincere, and there was a note of growth in them that I could never have imagined in Karina before. "Why do you want to meet?" I asked quietly, holding back the flood of thoughts that overwhelmed me. Karina was silent for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts, and then her voice sounded with unexpected confidence. "Big sister, I want to apologize. From the bottom of my heart. I feel like a phone call won't be able to convey all my feelings, so I want to see you in person to truly and sincerely apologize." I listened to her words carefully, feeling in them a sincerity that had not been there before. It seemed like there was another person standing in front of me, more mature and aware. "If it's difficult for you to meet me, that's fine too," she continued. "I understand that your feelings are the most important thing. But I really hope for our meeting." After a minute of silence, I finally decided. "Well, if so, let's meet next Saturday at 1400 hours in a cafe in front of the train station." Really? It makes me so happy. Thank you, sis. Relief could be heard in her voice before she hung up the phone. I stayed where I was, looking at the darkened cityscape outside the window. I took a deep breath for a while, trying to sort out my own feelings. It seemed that a storm was raging inside me, mixed emotions, anxiety, hope, doubts, overwhelmed me, giving me no rest. Was it the right decision to agree to a meeting with Karina? Will I be able to let go of an old grudge and believe in its changes? Questions were swarming in my head, but despite the inner uncertainty, I hoped that this meeting would be an important step that would change both of us. On the day of the meeting, I arrived at the cafe earlier than the agreed time. His heart was beating fast and unevenly, as if anticipating something important. My stomach was clenching, and I couldn't figure out which possessed me more, fear or anticipation. While waiting, as the hands of the clock slowly crept forward, I looked at each new incoming figure, but Karina was still not there. My anxiety gradually grew, but finally the cafe door swung open and I saw her. Karina looked completely different than before. She was dressed simply, her face was devoid of the usual makeup, and there was a quiet determination in her eyes. It was as if she had thrown off all the layers of protection that she had always protected herself with in order to show her real self. There was restraint in her step, sincerity in her expression. She walked slowly over to my desk, and I felt the tension between us ease. "Big sister, I'm really sorry," she said softly, as if she was afraid that my emotions might explode at any moment. I stared at her, unable to answer right away. There was another Karina in front of me, not the one I was used to seeing. For the first time in a long time, I could physically feel her changes. She continued, holding back the tears that were about to spill. "When I started working at my grandmother's house, I realized how much I relied on you," Karina said, her voice trembling, but she continued to speak, as if afraid not to have time to say everything. "I took you for granted. I never thought about how hard it was for you to sacrifice your dreams for us, for your family." Tears were streaming down her face, and I could see how sincerely she repented of her past actions. Every word she said echoed in my heart, and as she shared her experiences and realizations, I felt how many years of anger and resentment gradually began to dissolve. Karina talked about how working with her grandmother helped her realize her mistakes, how she managed to see her actions from the outside. She finally saw what I had been waiting for from her for so many years, understanding. Her voice, full of remorse and humility, sounded sincere and touching. I just sat and listened. I didn't need any more words, I didn't need any more explanations. In each of her sentences, it was clear how she had changed, how she tried to understand and accept herself and others. At some point, time seemed to slow down, and with it, my inner storm subsided. The heavy emotions that had been tormenting me for a long time began to go away, leaving room for something new. "Thank you, Karina. I accepted your apology," I finally said, feeling my heart lighten with every word. After that, we continued the conversation. For the first time in a long time, we spoke calmly, discussing the latest events in our lives, sharing experiences and joys. It was a valuable moment for both of us, a moment that finally opened the way for the restoration of relations. We talked for several hours, and I felt that this meeting was an important step towards a new beginning. When it was time to part ways, Karina handed me an envelope with the money she had earned by helping her grandmother. Her hard work and efforts have shown how much she has changed. "This is just the beginning, but I will do everything I can to fix it," she said, and I could see the strength and determination in her eyes. I accepted the envelope with gratitude, and my heart warmed up again. Karina had really grown up, and now her efforts were real, sincere. A few months later, I visited my grandmother's house again, where I met my parents. There were changes in their eyes too, and I finally heard them say a sincere apology. At the table where we once gathered as a family, we were able to share a meal together for the first time in a long time. It was a special moment filled with warmth that I thought I would never experience again. I couldn't say that all the wounds had healed, that I would be able to forgive everything at once, but I felt our steps towards reconciliation becoming more confident. Before I went home, my grandmother took me aside and, looking me straight in the eye, said, "Olivia, you have become very strong, but remember, the kindness that you continue to carry in your heart is no less important. This is the most important thing." Her words penetrated my soul. I hugged my grandmother, and tears began to flow down my cheeks. I understood that this was a new stage in my life and in our relationship. With each step, the weight on my heart became lighter, and I believed that this was only the beginning of the path to a new understanding and love in our family.